It took me a long time to realize that my body wasn't reacting to one place or one moment. It was reacting to accumulation. I remember standing in a room that looked completely fine and feeling my chest tighten slightly. Not in fear, just in recognition. My body noticed something my eyes couldn't. That was when I started to understand that exposure isn't always obvious. Before I go further, I want to gently orient us. This is how I show up right now. I use an AI version of myself because it allows me to share my lived experience, the research I've done, and everything I learned through trial and error without overwhelming my nervous system. If you're here because your body has been reacting in ways that don't line up with what things look like on the surface, you're not imagining that. And you're not alone. For a long time, I thought mold exposure was about visible damage. Black spots, a musty smell, something clearly wrong. I believed that if a space looked clean and dry, it was safe. That belief made sense. It's what most of us are taught to rely on. What I didn't understand yet was how mycotoxins move through environments quietly. They don't always announce themselves through sight or smell. They can be present in places that look intact, maintained, even new. And because of that, the body often becomes the first indicator that something isn't right. Looking back, I can see how this showed up for me. There were spaces where I felt inexplicably drained, rooms where my thoughts felt scattered, environments where my nervous system stayed alert even when nothing appeared wrong. At the time, I blamed stress or fatigue. I didn't yet know my body was responding to something it recognized as unsafe. One of the biggest misunderstandings I carried was believing exposure was limited to one location. I thought once we left the original mold environment, the chapter was closed. But mycotoxins don't always stay behind. They can travel through belongings, through porous materials, through air systems, through water-damaged spaces that don't look damaged anymore. This realization didn't bring panic. It brought clarity. Over time, I noticed patterns that only made sense when I zoomed out. My symptoms weren't random. They were contextual. Certain environments felt heavier. Certain buildings felt harder on my system. Even when I couldn't explain why, my body responded consistently. This was especially noticeable over weeks and months, not in dramatic reactions, but in subtle ones. My energy dipped in specific places. My breathing changed slightly. My thoughts slowed. These shifts were easy to dismiss if I wasn't paying attention, but once I noticed them, they repeated. As a parent, this awareness sharpened. I watched how my children responded in their own ways. One born in 2016. One born in 2021. Their reactions were quieter than mine, but still there. Changes in mood, energy, sensitivity. It reinforced something important for me. Mycotoxins don't affect everyone the same way, but they leave patterns if you know how to look. What took me the longest to understand is that exposure doesn't require constant contact to matter. Sometimes it's cumulative, small amounts over time, repeated environments, familiar spaces the body learns to brace against without conscious thought. This helped explain why my recovery felt inconsistent, why progress in one area stalled in another, why my nervous system stayed vigilant even when life felt calmer. My body wasn't confused. It was responding to layered input. The shift for me came when I stopped arguing with what my body noticed. I didn't need to label every source or solve every variable. I needed to respect that exposure isn't always visible, and that awareness itself is a form of healing. Over longer stretches of time, as environments became more consistent and predictable, my system softened. Not suddenly, gradually. The body doesn't rush trust. It builds it through repetition. If you're living in a space that looks fine but doesn't feel fine, I want to say this gently. Your experience matters, even if you can't point to a clear cause. The body is often responding to things that haven't been named yet. As we come toward the end of this reflection, I want to ground this in something steady. Understanding where mycotoxins can come from didn't make me hypervigilant. It made me more compassionate toward my body's responses. It helped me stop dismissing sensations just because I couldn't explain them. Healing didn't require me to identify every source. It required me to trust that my body's signals had meaning, even when they were quiet. If you want to read more lived reflections like this, where I explore mold, mycotoxins, and recovery through experience rather than instruction, I share them at indoorarinsights.com. It's simply a place where I put language to the parts of exposure that often go unnoticed. For now, you don't need certainty. You don't need to prove anything. You're allowed to listen to your body's responses and trust that awareness itself is part of healing.